The sky burned orange and red as another city died. Ambassador Telos stood before the observation screen in the underground bunker, watching his world end. His crystalline body flickered with pale blue light, the color of deep sadness among his people. Around him, the last members of the government sat in silence. Some prayed to old gods, others simply stared at nothing. Sanctuary Prime had been peaceful for 10,000 years. They had never known war. They had never needed to. When they joined the Galactic Conquered 300 years ago, they were promised protection. They paid their fees. They followed every rule. They trusted their allies. Now that trust was killing them. The Harrow Collective had come without warning. 10,000 ships appeared in orbit like a swarm of metal insects. They did not negotiate. They did not explain. They simply began to harvest. The Harrow were machines, ancient machines that had forgotten their creators long ago. They traveled from world to world, taking everything of value, minerals, metals, and organic life, which they processed into fuel for their endless expansion. Telos had sent the emergency signal to the Galactic Conquered within the first hour of the attack. Their response came quickly, but it brought no comfort. "We acknowledge your distress," the message said. "Fleet mobilization requires a council vote. All member species must agree before military action can be taken. Estimated response time is 47 standard rotations." 47 rotations, nearly 50 days by counting. His people would be dead in 3. Telos turned away from the screen. His advisor, a young named, looked up at him with wide eyes, was barely past childhood, too young to remember a time before the Conquered's protection, too young to understand how the galaxy really worked. "Ambassador," said softly, "what do we do?" Telos did not answer immediately. He walked to the communications console and stared at it for a long moment. There was one option left, one terrible option that no sane species would consider. The forbidden frequencies. Every species in the Conquered knew about them. They were the channels used by quarantined civilizations, species deemed too dangerous to interact with, species that the Conquered kept isolated for the safety of all. One species in particular. The humans. Telos had read the reports about them. Everyone had. They came from a world called Earth, a planet so hostile that it seemed designed to create monsters. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was corrosive. Predators hunted in every environment. Diseases killed millions. Natural disasters struck constantly. And somehow in that hell, intelligent life had evolved. The humans were not just survivors. They were something far worse. They were apex predators who had conquered their own death world and then reached for the stars. They fought wars for ideas. They hunted for entertainment. They carried violence in their very genes. When they first made contact with the Conquered, the Council had been terrified. They studied the humans for decades before making a decision. These creatures were too dangerous. They could not be allowed to spread among civilized species. So the humans were quarantined. Their territory was marked with warning beacons. Travel to their space was forbidden. Contact was prohibited. For 100 years, humanity had been alone. Telos placed his hand on the console. His crystalline fingers trembled. "Ambassador," said, his voice rising with fear, "you cannot be considering what I think you are considering." "The Conquered will not save us," Telos replied. "The Harrow will not stop. In 3 days, every on this planet will be dead or processed. Our children, our elders, our entire civilization. But the humans are monsters." "Perhaps," Telos closed his eyes, "but the Harrow are monsters too, and they are here. The humans are far away. Maybe they will not come. Maybe they will ignore us like everyone else." He opened the forbidden frequency. Static filled the bunker. "Or maybe," Telos whispered, "monsters are exactly what we need." He began to speak. He described the attack. He gave coordinates. He begged for help from anyone listening. His voice broke several times, but he kept talking until there was nothing left to say. Then he waited. Hours passed. Above them, the harvesting continued. Reports came in from across the planet. Cities were being dismantled piece by piece. Processing facilities were being constructed. Citizens were being rounded up and prepared for conversion. Telos sat in the darkness and prepared to watch his species die. Then the console flickered. A voice cut through the static. It was harsh and strange, speaking Galactic Common with a heavy accent. The pronunciation was wrong. The grammar was imperfect, but the words were clear. "Government, this is Admiral Park of the Terran Republic Navy. We received your distress signal. We are 19 hours away from your position. Hold on. We are coming." The bunker went completely silent. Looked at Telos with an expression of pure terror. "Ambassador, what have you done?" Telos stared at the console. His crystalline heart was beating too fast. He had just invited the most dangerous species in the known galaxy to his world. He had called them monsters. But as another explosion shook the bunker, as dust fell from the ceiling and alarms screamed in the distance, Telos realized something important. He was no longer afraid of the humans. He was afraid of what would happen if they did not arrive in time. "I have given us hope," he said quietly. "Whether that hope saves us or destroys us, we will find out in 19 hours. Above them, the sky continued to burn, but somewhere in the darkness of space, something was coming, something the Harrow Collective had never faced before. They were on their way. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable and watched the stars turn into lines of white light. The fleet was moving at maximum speed, pushing the engines harder than regulations allowed. Around her, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. No one complained. No one questioned the mission. They had all heard the distress call. Was 46 years old. She had been born on a space station orbiting Mars and had never set foot on Earth. But she carried Earth inside her, as all humans did. Her bones were dense from generations of heavy gravity. Her immune system was aggressive from fighting disease. Her mind was sharp because her ancestors had survived by outsmarting predators that wanted to eat them. She was a product of the, even if she had never seen it. "Admiral," her tactical officer said, "I have the full report on the situation." Lieutenant Commander was a calm man in his 30s. He had served under for 6 years and had learned to deliver bad news without emotion. That skill was useful now. "Tell me," said. Pulled up a holographic display. It showed a planet surrounded by thousands of red dots. Each dot was a Harrow ship. "The is under full assault. 10,000 confirmed Harrow vessels, possibly more in reserve. The Harrow Collective has begun surface operations. They are constructing processing facilities to convert the local population." "Convert them into what?" "Fuel. The Harrow use organic matter as an energy source for their expansion. Based on historical data, they will strip the planet completely within 72 hours. Studied the display. The numbers were bad, very bad. Her fleet consisted of 14 capital ships, 60 cruisers, 200 frigates, and 1 carrier with 8,000 strike craft. It was a powerful force by human standards, but they would be outnumbered more than 10 to 1. "What about the Galactic Concord?" she asked. "They are member species. Where is their protection fleet?" His expression did not change, but his voice became slightly colder. "The Concord has acknowledged the distress call. They estimate a response time of 47 standard rotations pending a council vote." Laughed. It was not a happy sound. The Galactic Concord, a collection of peaceful species who believed that war was primitive and diplomacy could solve everything. They had looked at humanity and seen only violence. They had quarantined Earth's children and called it protection for the galaxy. But when one of their own members faced extinction, they scheduled a meeting. "Typical," said softly, "absolutely typical." She turned to face the main viewport. The stars continued to streak past, each one a sun with planets of its own. The galaxy was vast and full of life. Most of that life wanted nothing to do with humanity. Understood why. Humans were frightening. Their history was written in blood. They had fought each other for thousands of years before finally achieving something like peace. Even now, violence lived in their hearts like a sleeping animal, always ready to wake. But humans had something else too, something the conquered species did not understand. They remembered what it felt like to be alone. 100 years ago, when humanity first reached the stars, they had hoped to find friends. Instead, they found fear. Every species they contacted recoiled from them. The conquered studied them like dangerous animals and then built a cage. For a century, humanity had lived in isolation. They had watched other species travel freely while they were confined to their small corner of space. They had asked for acceptance and received only rejection. And they remembered what happened at 442b. 3 million humans had colonized that world. When a plague struck, they sent distress calls to every species within range. They begged for medical assistance. They offered anything in exchange for help. No one came. The plague killed everyone. 3 million men, women, and children died while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Humanity never forgot. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "we are receiving a message from conquered space. They are warning us that entering territory without authorization is a violation of quarantine protocols." Smiled grimly, "Tell them we received their message, then tell them to go to hell." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "Listen carefully. In approximately 17 hours, we will engage a force that outnumbers us significantly. Many of us will not survive. This is not our territory. These are not our people. The conquered that imprisoned us is now threatening us with consequences." She paused and looked at each officer in turn. "But somewhere down there, innocent people are dying. They called for help, and we are the only ones who answered. That is enough reason for me. If anyone disagrees, you may leave the fleet at the next opportunity with no consequences." No one moved. "Good," nodded slowly. "Commander, have your Marines prepare for ground deployment. Lieutenant, begin tactical planning for engagement. I want options for maximum damage to the Harrow fleet." She sat down in her command chair and picked up her coffee cup. It was cold, but she drank it anyway. "We have 17 hours to figure out how to win an unwinnable battle. Let us get to work." Around her, the bridge became a hive of activity. Officers shouted orders. Screens flickered with data. Plans began to take shape. They were coming, and they were angry. Ambassador Telos had not slept in 2 days. The bunker shook constantly now. Dust fell from the ceiling with every explosion. The lights flickered and sometimes went dark for minutes at a time. Reports from the surface had stopped coming because there was no one left to send them. The Harrow were efficient. They worked without rest, without mercy, without any emotion at all. City by city, they dismantled everything they had built. Building by building, they rounded up survivors and took them to the processing facilities. Telos tried not to think about what happened in those facilities. Young sat at the communications console, monitoring all frequencies. His crystalline body had dimmed from its normal bright yellow to a pale gray. Fear did that too. It drained their light. "Ambassador," said suddenly, "I am detecting new signatures. Ships are exiting compressed space at the edge of the system." Telos felt his heart stop. "How many? Is it more Harrow?" His fingers moved across the console. His eyes widened. "No, Ambassador, the identification codes. They are Terran." The bunker went silent. Every present turned to look at the display screen. Small blue dots appeared at the edge of the system, moving fast, very fast. "Count them," Telos whispered. 14 large signatures, capital ships, 60 medium signatures, 200 small signatures. paused, and one massive signature, some kind of carrier vessel. Against 10,000 Harrow ships, one of the government ministers laughed bitterly. They came to die with us. How noble. But Telos was watching the display carefully. The Terran ships were not forming defensive patterns. They were not holding position. They were accelerating directly toward the Harrow fleet. The communications console crackled. "Government, this is Admiral Park. We have arrived. Please confirm location of population centers and surviving civilians. We will begin engagement immediately." Immediately, no discussion, no planning session, no waiting. Telos grabbed the communicator. "Admiral, the Harrow have 10,000 ships. You cannot possibly win against those numbers." There was a pause. When the Admiral spoke again, her voice was calm. "Ambassador, with respect, please let us worry about the numbers. Just tell us where your people are. We will handle the rest." On the display, the Terran fleet hit the Harrow perimeter. What happened next would give Telos nightmares for the rest of his life. The Terran dreadnought Indomitable did not slow down as it approached the Harrow formation. Instead, it accelerated. Its forward batteries began firing in a continuous stream, each shot precise and devastating. Harrow ships exploded like bubbles. Around the dreadnought, smaller Terran vessels moved in patterns that seemed chaotic but worked perfectly together. Cruisers created gaps in the Harrow lines. Frigates poured through those gaps and struck at support vessels. The entire formation flowed like water, always moving, never stopping. Then the carrier Eternal Dawn opened its launch bays. 8,000 strike craft poured into space. Each one was small, fast, and carried enough firepower to destroy a vessel 10 times its size. Each one was piloted by a single human being. They did not fly in neat formations like conquered pilots. They flew like predators, each one choosing targets independently, communicating through instinct as much as radio. They swarmed around Harrow capital ships and tore them apart piece by piece. "This is impossible," whispered. They are laughing." Telos listened to the Terran combat frequencies. Was right. Among the tactical commands and damage reports, he could hear human pilots laughing. They were enjoying this. The battle that should have been their death was giving them joy. In the first hour, the Terran fleet destroyed over 1,400 Harrow vessels. The Harrow began to adapt. They concentrated their forces, trying to overwhelm the Terran ships with sheer numbers. A Terran cruiser was hit and exploded. Then another. A frigate broke apart under concentrated fire. But the humans did not retreat. They did not even slow down. "Admiral," Telos called desperately, "you are taking heavy losses. Please withdraw and reconsider your approach." The Admiral's response was immediate. "Negative, Ambassador. We are exactly where we need to be. The Harrow are focusing on us now instead of your planet. That was the plan. You plan to be overwhelmed. We plan to make them angry." There was something like humor in the Admiral's voice. "Angry enemies make mistakes. Watch." On the display, Telos saw the Harrow fleet pulling ships away from orbital positions to reinforce their battle line. The bombardment of the surface had stopped. The harvesting operations had paused. The humans were not trying to win the battle through superior firepower. They were making themselves such a threat that the Harrow could not ignore them. Every ship that came to fight the Terrans was a ship that was not killing civilians. It was brilliant. It was insane. It was the most expensive distraction in military history. "Why?" Telos asked. "Why are you doing this for us?" The Admiral did not answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. "Because you asked for help. And where we come from, that means something." Another Terran ship exploded. Another 100 humans died. But the fleet kept fighting. Telos watched the impossible battle and felt something he had not felt in days. Hope. Terrible, painful hope. The monsters had come to save them. And they were winning. Commander hit the ground hard. Her drop pod had fallen from orbit in less than 3 minutes, burning through the atmosphere like a meteor. The impact would have killed any other species. For a human in powered armor, it was just another Tuesday. She kicked open the pod door and stepped out into hell. The Harrow processing facility stretched before her like a nightmare made of metal. Massive machines churned and groaned. Conveyor belts carried unidentifiable materials toward central furnaces, and everywhere, there were pods containing prisoners. Thousands of them. Their crystalline bodies were dim, almost dark. Tubes connected them to the facility's systems, slowly draining their life force. Most were unconscious. Some were dead. Felt the anger rise in her chest like fire. Around her, 200 Marines were landing in their own drop pods. They were the elite of the Terran Republic military. Each one had trained for years. Each one had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not survive. Marines called through the communications channel. We have one objective, save as many civilians as possible. The Harrow are machines, they feel nothing. We make them feel something today. Move out. The Marines spread across the facility like a wave. Sergeant led his squad toward the main entrance. He was a veteran of 3 campaigns, with scars on his face and ice in his eyes. He had seen terrible things in his career, but this facility was worse than anything he had experienced. Contact left, one of his soldiers shouted. Harrow ground units emerged from the shadows. They were humanoid machines, designed for efficiency rather than combat. Their weapons were tools meant for harvesting, not fighting. They had never faced humans before. Raised his rifle and fired. The first shot took a machine through what passed for its head. The second shot disabled another. His squad followed his example, and within seconds, 10 Harrow units were scrap metal on the ground. Push forward, ordered, find the prisoners. Across the facility, similar scenes played out. Marines cut through Harrow resistance like knives through paper. The machines were numerous but slow. They were designed to process helpless victims, not to fight predators. Private was barely 20 years old. This was his first real combat mission. His hands were shaking inside his armored gloves, but he kept moving forward with his squad. They found a chamber full of pods. Inside each pod was a child. Stopped breathing for a moment. The children were so small. Their crystal bodies barely glowed at all. Some were connected to machines that pulsed with stolen energy. Others were completely still. Medic screamed, "We need medics here now." Commander heard the call and redirected resources. Medical teams rushed to the chamber while Marines held a defensive perimeter. One by one, the pods were opened. Children were lifted out and laid on the ground. Some were still alive, many were not. Knelt beside a small girl. The child's eyes flickered open, filled with confusion and fear. Her crystalline hand reached up weakly. "You are safe now," said softly. "We are going to take you home." The girl did not understand human words, but she seemed to understand the tone. Her body relaxed slightly. Her light grew just a little brighter. Picked her up and carried her toward the evacuation point. The battle for the facility lasted 4 hours. By the end, the Marines had cleared every section, destroyed every Harrow unit, and opened every prisoner pod. 40,000 civilians were rescued from that single location. Similar operations were happening at 15 other facilities across the planet. But victory had a price. Sergeant took a shot meant for one of his soldiers. The wound was severe. Medical nanobots worked frantically to repair the damage, but he would carry the scar forever. 17 Marines died at the facility. Their bodies were recovered and prepared for transport home. In the Terran Republic, no soldier was ever left behind. Private sat outside the facility as the evacuation shuttles landed. His armor was scratched and burned. His hands had finally stopped shaking, but his eyes were different now. Older. Commander found him there. First combat is always hard, she said quietly. Looked up at her. They were children, Commander, just children. I know. How could anyone do this? How could any species just harvest people like crops? Sat down beside him. For a moment, she was not a commander. She was just a tired soldier who had seen too much. The galaxy is not fair, she said. It is not kind. There are species out there who see other living beings as resources to be used. That is the truth of the universe. She paused. But there are also species who refuse to accept that truth, who believe that life has value, who will fight and die for strangers they have never met. She looked at directly. That is what we are. That is what makes us human. Was quiet for a long moment. The Conquered calls us monsters, he said finally. Yes, smiled grimly. Let them. Today, monsters saved 40,000 innocent lives. I can live with that label. She stood and offered her hand, took it and rose to his feet. Above them, the battle in orbit continued, but on the ground the tide had turned. They were winning. The Harrow Collective retreated on the third day. Admiral Park watched their ships disappear into compressed space, one group at a time. They were not defeated. They still had thousands of vessels in reserve, but they had calculated the cost of taking Sanctuary Prime and decided it was too high. The humans had taught them fear. Stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and felt nothing but exhaustion. Her fleet had been reduced by a third. 2,416 humans had died in the battle. Each name was recorded. Each family would receive a personal message from her. It was a small comfort. It was all she had to give. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander said quietly, Ambassador Telos has requested permission to board. Nodded, grant him access. I will meet him in the conference room. She walked slowly through the corridors of her ship. The Indomitable was damaged but functional. Repair crews worked constantly, welding metal and replacing components. The ship would fly again. It would fight again. But it would never forget what happened here. Entered the conference room just as Ambassador Telos materialized via transport beam. The leader looked different than he had appeared in communications. His crystalline body was dim and cracked in several places. His violet light had faded to almost nothing. But he was alive. His species was alive. Admiral Park, Telos said formally, I come to offer the gratitude of the people. Gestured to a chair. Please sit, you look exhausted. Telos hesitated, then lowered himself carefully into the seat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Why? Telos finally asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. We are strangers to you. We are members of the Conquered that imprisoned your people. We have nothing to offer you. Why did you come? Why did so many of your people die for us? Considered the question carefully. The real answer was complicated. Politics played a role. Strategy played a role. Humanity's desperate need to prove they were more than monsters played a role. But those were not the reasons that mattered. 100 years ago, said slowly, my great-grandmother was born on a colony world called 442b. She was 3 years old when a plague struck the planet. Her parents sent distress signals to every species within range. They begged for medical help. They offered everything they had. She paused. No one came. The conquered species decided that helping humans was too risky, too dangerous. They watched from a distance while 3 million people died. Telos's light flickered with colors could not interpret. Shame, perhaps, or horror. My great-grandmother survived because her immune system was stronger than most. She grew up alone on a dead world, surrounded by graves. When rescue finally came, she was 12 years old. She never forgot what the galaxy did to her people, and she made sure her children never forgot either. Met Telos's eyes directly. You asked for help, no matter who you were, no matter what the conquered had done to us. You were dying and you called out to anyone who would listen. She shook her head slowly. We could not ignore that call, not after what happened to our own. We will not become the species that watches while others die. Telos was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice trembled. The Galactic Conquered will not accept this. They will issue sanctions against your people. They may increase the quarantine. They may take military action. I know. They will call you dangerous. They will use this intervention as proof that humans cannot be trusted. I know that too, smiled, though there was no joy in it. Let them say what they want. Let them punish us for saving lives. We will endure as we always have. She stood and walked to the viewport. Sanctuary Prime turned slowly below them, but surviving. Fires still burned in some regions, but there was also rebuilding. There was hope. Ambassador, my species has been called monsters since we first reached the stars. Maybe the Conquered is right. Maybe we are monsters. She turned back to face him. But monsters can choose what they fight for. Today, we chose to fight for your people. We chose to be the help that no one gave to us. Telos rose from his chair. His crystalline form straightened, and for the first time saw his light begin to grow brighter. Admiral, he said, I came here to thank you, but I realize now that thanks are not enough. He placed one hand over his chest in a gesture that seemed formal and ancient. The people will not forget this. When the Conquered threatens you, we will speak in your defense. When they isolate you, we will reach out. We will be your voice in their councils, even if they do not wish to hear. Felt something shift inside her, a small warmth in a very cold universe. That is more than we expected, she said. It is less than you deserve. Telos lowered his hand. Perhaps one day the galaxy will see humans as we have learned to see you, not as monsters but as protectors, as allies, as friends. He turned toward the door, then paused. Admiral, how do humans say goodbye? Thought about it, there were many ways, formal phrases, casual waves, words that meant nothing and everything. We say, until we meet again. Telos nodded slowly. Until we meet again, Admiral Park, may your stars shine brightly. He departed and was alone. She stood at the viewport for a long time, watching Sanctuary Prime rotate beneath her. Somewhere down there, Commander was coordinating relief efforts. Private was helping rebuild what the Harrow had destroyed. Sergeant was recovering from his wounds. They had lost so much. They had gained something too, perhaps not friendship, perhaps not alliance, but a beginning, a crack in the wall that the galaxy had built around them. 6 months later, the formally requested an alliance with the Terran Republic. They were the first species to do so. The Galactic Conquered issued protests. They threatened sanctions. They warned that associating with would have consequences. They ignored them. Other species watched this defiance with interest. Quietly, carefully, they began to ask questions about the humans, about the monsters who answered distress calls, about the who died for strangers. The wall was cracking. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity waited, ready to answer the next call for help. Ready to be the monsters the galaxy needed them to be.